Outside a busy Los Angeles coffee shop, 12-year-old Sarah huddles against the cold, her white cane across her lap, and a worn cardboard sign at her feet. For 3 months, she's been living on the streets, carrying a secret too heavy for her young shoulders. She doesn't know that today. Everything will change. When Keanu Reeves stops to buy her breakfast, he notices something unusual about her eyes. Something that doesn't match her story. What starts as a simple act of kindness unveils a mystery that will transform both their lives forever. But time is running out, and Sarah must decide if she can break a promise to her grandmother before she loses her one chance at a miracle. Sarah pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders as the cold morning wind swept through the streets of Los Angeles. Even though she couldn't see the sun rising, she could feel its weak warmth on her face. She knew it was early because the sidewalk beneath her wasn't vibrating with the footsteps of busy people yet. Careful not to bump into anything, she reached down to make sure her cardboard sign was still propped against her legs. The corners were getting soft and worn from being folded and unfolded so many times. Her fingers traced over the bumpy marker, writing she knew said, "Please help, blind and hungry." Jimmy from the shelter had written it for her 3 months ago, back when she first ended up on the streets. 3 months. It felt like forever ago that she had a real home, a warm bed, and her grandmother's gentle voice waking her up each morning. "Keep your chin up, sweet pea," Grandma Rose would always say. "There's nothing but good things ahead for my brave girl." Sarah's throat got tight thinking about those mornings. She could still smell the cinnamon oatmeal Grandma Rose made every day, could still feel the soft yarn of her grandmother's sweater when they hugged goodbye before school. But that was before everything changed. The memory of that terrible day crashed over her like a wave. She had come home from school to find their apartment unusually quiet. No radio playing old songs, no smell of dinner cooking, just silence. "Grandma," Sarah had called out, tapping her white cane against the familiar walls as she made her way to the living room. "Are you taking a nap?" But Grandma Rose didn't answer. She would never answer again. Sarah shook her head, trying to push the memories away. She couldn't cry now. Crying made people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people didn't stop to help. She needed help today. Her stomach had been empty for so long it didn't even growl anymore. The sidewalk started to buzz with early morning energy. Sarah straightened up and held her white cane across her lap, where people could see it. The morning crowd was usually kinder than the afternoon rush. Business people heading to their offices sometimes stopped to drop coins or even dollar bills in the little cup beside her. "Good morning," she said softly whenever she heard footsteps slow near her. Some people murmured hellos back. Others just clinked their donations into her cup without speaking. Most hurried past, their footsteps quick and purposeful. Sarah had learned to tell a lot about people from their footsteps. High heels meant businesswomen who sometimes stopped to give her fruit or granola bars. Heavy work boots usually meant construction workers who didn't have much to give, but often shared their coffee or breakfast burritos. Quick, light steps were usually young people who rarely stopped at all. As the morning went on, the sun grew stronger on her face. Sarah knew she should move to her afternoon spot soon, where an overhang would provide shade. But moving meant packing up her few belongings, using her cane to navigate through crowds that didn't always notice her, and hoping no one had taken her usual place by the coffee shop. She reached into her backpack, counting her treasures by touch. One worn paperback book in Braille, a collection of fairy tales her grandmother had given her for her 10th birthday. A small photo album she couldn't see but knew contained pictures of happier times. Her grandmother's soft wool scarf that still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. And at the very bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, her most precious possession. Her grandmother's silver locket with their picture inside. The social workers had tried to help after Grandma Rose died. They'd talked about foster homes and special schools, but Sarah had overheard them discussing splitting up her things, selling her grandmother's belongings to pay for her care. She couldn't bear the thought of losing the only pieces of her grandmother she had left. So she'd packed her backpack the night before they were supposed to come take her. Jimmy from the local shelter had found her wandering the streets that first night. He'd shown her safe places to sleep, taught her which corners were best for collecting money, and introduced her to other homeless people who looked out for her. "Move along, kid." A gruff voice suddenly interrupted her thoughts. Sarah recognized the heavy footsteps of Officer Martinez, who patrolled this area. "You know you can't stay in one spot all day." "Yes, sir," Sarah said, gathering her cup with its few coins. "I'm just heading to my afternoon spot." "You should be in school," he said, his voice softer now. "Let me call social services. They can help." Sarah shook her head quickly, her heart racing. "No, thank you, sir. I'm okay." She stood up, unfolding her white cane with practiced movements. "I'm moving right now." Officer Martinez sighed. She heard him shift his weight, probably debating whether to insist. But like every other time, he just said, "Be careful out there, kid." Sarah nodded and began tapping her way down the sidewalk. She'd memorized the route to her afternoon spot: 20 steps to the corner, wait for the chirping crosswalk signal, cross the street, 12 steps to the newsstand, turn right, 30 steps to the coffee shop overhang. The smell of coffee and pastries made her stomach clench as she settled into her spot. She arranged her sign and cup again, straightened her jacket, and tried to look presentable. Grandma Rose had always said that just because they were poor didn't mean they couldn't have dignity. The afternoon crowd began to build. Sarah heard the coffee shop door opening and closing, the buzz of conversations, the clink of cups. She smiled politely toward the sounds of footsteps, said her quiet thank yous, and tried not to think about how many more hours until she could head to the shelter for dinner. A warm gust of air carried the scent of chocolate chip cookies as the coffee shop door opened again. Footsteps approached, steady and purposeful, but not rushing. They stopped in front of her. "Are you okay?" asked a gentle voice. "You look cold." There was something different about this voice. Something kind and familiar, like the way her grandmother used to talk to her. Sarah turned her face toward the sound, not knowing that this moment would change everything. "I'm okay," she said softly. "Just a little hungry." "Just a little hungry?" the kind voice repeated. "How about we fix that?" Sarah hesitated. Jimmy from the shelter had warned her about going anywhere with strangers, no matter how nice they seemed. She gripped her white cane tighter. "There's a diner right around the corner," the man said. His voice stayed gentle, like he could sense her fear. "We can sit by the window where everyone can see us. You'll be completely safe." A gust of wind made Sarah shiver, and her empty stomach cramped. Painfully, the man must have noticed because she heard the soft rustle of fabric and suddenly felt something warm and heavy settle around her shoulders. A coat. "I'm Keanu," he said, "and I promise I just want to help." Sarah pulled the coat tighter around herself. It smelled clean and slightly woodsy, like pine trees. "I'm Sarah," she whispered. "It's nice to meet you, Sarah." She heard him sit down on the sidewalk next to her, keeping a respectful distance. Not too close to be scary, but close enough to talk. "I've seen you here before, you know. Always so polite to everyone, even when they ignore you." Sarah's fingers traced the edges of her cardboard sign. "Most people are nice, even if they can't." Help? Some of them still say hello. How long have you been out here, Sarah? She swallowed hard. 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. That's a very exact count. I remember the date because Sarah's voice caught. Because it was the day after my grandmother's funeral. The man, Keanu, was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was even gentler than before. I'm so sorry about your grandmother. Were you too close? Sarah nodded, feeling tears prick at her eyes. She was all I had. After she was gone, they wanted to put me in foster care. But I couldn't. She stopped, worried she was saying too much. Couldn't what, Sarah? I couldn't let them sell her things. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. They said they'd have to sell everything to pay for my care. Her books, her pictures, her chair where she used to read to me every night. I couldn't let them take her away like that. She felt a tissue being pressed into her hand. So, you ran away, Keanu said. It wasn't a question. I know it was stupid, Sarah admitted, wiping her eyes. But these are all I have left of her. She touched her backpack protectively. It wasn't stupid. You were protecting what matters to you. Keanu's voice held no judgment. But you know… What? I bet your grandmother would want you to be safe and well-fed more than anything else. Sarah's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly. She heard Keanu chuckle softly. That settles it. How about that meal I mentioned? Annie's Diner makes the best chocolate chip pancakes in Los Angeles. Sarah found herself smiling despite her caution. Even better than McDonald's? Way better than McDonald's. And I'm something of a pancake expert. There was a smile in his voice that made Sarah feel warm inside. What do you say? Sarah thought for a moment. He hadn't tried to grab her or force her to go. He'd given her his coat and sat down to talk first. And something about his voice made her feel safe, the way she used to feel when her grandmother was alive. Okay, she said finally, but just for pancakes. Just for pancakes, he agreed. She heard him stand up and dust off his pants. May I help you pack up your things? Sarah nodded, and together they gathered her cup of coins and carefully folded her sign. She put both in her backpack, then unfolded her white cane. I can follow you, she said. Just maybe tell me if there are any curbs or obstacles? Of course. She felt him gently touch her elbow. The diner's about a block away. There's a newspaper stand to your right, and the sidewalk's pretty crowded right now. They walked slowly, Keanu describing everything ahead of them. Careful, there's a bike rack here. Watch out for the planter on your left. The crosswalk's coming up, but we've got a red light. His running commentary reminded her of how her grandmother used to guide her, and Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She pushed the feeling away, focusing instead on the sounds and smells around them. The traffic noise grew louder as they neared the corner, and she could smell something delicious cooking. Here we are, Keanu said, as a bell jingled above them. Warm air wrapped around Sarah, carrying the scent of coffee, bacon, and syrup. Her mouth watered. Hi there, a cheerful voice called out. Booth or counter? Booth by the window, please, Keanu answered. If that's okay with you, Sarah? She nodded, carefully following his directions until she felt the edge of a vinyl booth seat. She slid in, keeping her cane close. Can I take your coat while you eat? Keanu asked. Sarah clutched it tighter for a moment before remembering it was his coat in the first place. Oh, right. Thank you for letting me borrow it. She shrugged it off and held it out. Here's your menu, the waitress said. Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like me to… I can read it to you, Keanu offered quickly. Let's see. They've got those chocolate chip pancakes I mentioned, blueberry pancakes, banana pancakes, regular pancakes. Chocolate chip sounds good, Sarah said shyly. But are you sure it's okay? It might be expensive. Absolutely okay. Get whatever you want. How about some eggs and bacon too? Growing kids need protein. Sarah's stomach growled again at the mention of bacon. Maybe just one piece? How about 3 pieces, and we'll get you a side of fresh fruit too, Keanu suggested. You can always take what you don't finish with you. After they ordered, Sarah found herself relaxing as Keanu asked her about her favorite books. She told him about her Braille copy of fairy tales and how her grandmother had saved up to buy it for her birthday. Do you go to the library? He asked. They usually have good Braille collections. Sarah shook her head. I used to, but I don't have a library card anymore. You need an address? She heard him make a thoughtful sound, but before he could respond, their food arrived. The smell was amazing. Okay, your plate is right in front of you, Keanu explained. Pancakes are at 6 o'clock, bacon at 2 o'clock, fruit cup at 10 o'clock. Syrup is just to your right. Butter at 3 o'clock. Sarah reached out carefully, finding each item exactly where he'd described. As she took her first bite of pancake, she couldn't hold back a small sound of happiness. Good? Keanu asked, and she could hear the smile in his voice. So good, she agreed, around a mouthful of chocolate and fluffy pancake. Thank you. As they ate, Keanu asked careful questions about her life. Where she slept, usually the shelter, but sometimes doorways when the shelter was full. Where she got food, mostly the shelter and kind people on the street. If she had any other family. No, it had just been her and Grandma Rose for as long as she could remember. Sarah found herself telling him things she hadn't told anyone, about how scared she'd been that first night on the streets, about Jimmy from the shelter teaching her which areas were safe, about missing school and her friends. But when Keanu asked about her blindness, Sarah felt herself tense up. Have you always been blind? He asked gently. Sarah pushed a piece of pancake around her plate. Mostly, she said vaguely. Grandma took care of everything I needed. Something in his voice changed slightly. Did you have a regular doctor? I'm full, Sarah said quickly, putting down her fork even though she had food left. I should go. Thank you for breakfast. Sarah, wait. Keanu's voice was still kind, but there was something else there now. Concern? Suspicion? If you need medical help. I don't, she said firmly, sliding out of the booth and unfolding her cane. Thank you for the food. Really. But I have to go. She heard him stand up. At least let me make sure you get back safely. I know the way. Sarah turned toward where she thought the door was. Please don't follow me. Okay, he said after a moment. But Sarah, I'll be at Annie's tomorrow morning at 9, having breakfast. If you want more pancakes or just to talk. Sarah was already hurrying toward the door, her cane tapping frantically. She had to get out before he asked more questions, before he figured out what she was hiding. Behind her, she heard him call out one last time. I'll be here, Sarah, every morning at 9. She burst out onto the sidewalk, heart pounding. The noise and bustle of the street swallowed her up as she tapped her way back to familiar territory, trying to ignore the guilty voice in her head that sounded like her grandmother. Don't lie to nice people, sweet pea, the voice whispered. They only want to help. I'm sorry, Grandma, Sarah whispered back, wiping away tears. But I promised I wouldn't be a burden to anyone ever again. Keanu watched from Annie's diner window as Sarah disappeared into the crowd, her white cane tapping quickly against the sidewalk. Something about her story didn't add up, and his instincts told him she needed more help, than she was willing to accept. He pulled out his phone and called his friend Marcus, who worked as a social worker in the area. "Hey Marcus, I need a favor," Keanu said, keeping his voice low. "There's a homeless girl named Sarah, about 12 years old. She's been on the streets for 3 months. Says her grandmother died." "Hold on," Marcus replied. He heard keyboard clicking in the background. "Sarah, grandmother. Here it is. Sarah Mitchell? Grandmother was Rose Mitchell? She didn't tell me her last name, but that timing matches. What can you tell me?" "Not much officially, but—" Marcus paused. "Look, the grandmother did die 3 months ago. Heart attack. Sarah disappeared the day before she was supposed to go into the system. We've been looking for her." Keanu watched a family walk past the diner window, a young girl holding her mother's hand. "What about her medical history?" "She's blind, but something seemed off when I asked about it." More clicking. "That's weird," Marcus said. "There are a lot of medical bills here, regular appointments with an eye specialist up until about 4 months ago. Dr. Emily Chen at Pacific Children's Hospital. Can you get me an appointment with Dr. Chen?" "Keanu?" Marcus's voice held a warning. "You know I can't share confidential medical information. I'm not asking for information. I just want to understand how I can help her." Keanu ran a hand through his hair. "She's sleeping on the streets, Marcus. In December." A long sigh came through the phone. "Dr. Chen has office hours this afternoon. That's all I can tell you." "Thanks, Marcus. I owe you one." After hanging up, Keanu paid the bill, leaving a generous tip for the waitress. He made sure to get a receipt. Something told him he'd need to prove to Sarah that he'd been here. The Pacific Children's Hospital was a cheerful building painted in bright colors, with a playground visible through the front windows. Keanu found Dr. Chen's office on the 3rd floor. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said, "but Dr. Chen is fully booked today." "I don't need an appointment," Keanu explained. "I just need 5 minutes to talk about a former patient, Sarah Mitchell." The receptionist's expression changed at Sarah's name. "Oh, let me check with Dr. Chen." A few minutes later, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and silver-streaked black hair came out. "I'm Dr. Chen. You have information about Sarah?" "I just met her this morning," Keanu said. "She's living on the streets." Dr. Chen's face fell. "Come into my office, please." Once they were seated, Dr. Chen pulled out a thick file. "I've been worried sick about Sarah since she disappeared. We were in the middle of a crucial treatment plan when her grandmother died," Keanu finished. "Yes." Dr. Chen opened the file, then looked at Keanu carefully. "I can't share specific medical details without consent, but I can tell you this. Sarah's condition is treatable. The surgery has a very high success rate." "Surgery?" Keanu leaned forward. "You mean she doesn't have to be blind?" Dr. Chen chose her words carefully. Sarah's grandmother was trying to save money for the procedure. Insurance wouldn't cover it because it was considered elective. Rose was making payments, a little each month, but she died before they could afford it, Keanu said quietly. "The last time I saw Sarah, she was so excited. Rose had finally saved almost enough." Dr. Chen's voice cracked slightly. "She was talking about all the things she wanted to see first when she got her vision back. The ocean, a sunset, her grandmother's face." Keanu felt his chest tighten. Why would she run away from a chance to see again? Rose's medical bills were substantial. After she died, Dr. Chen shook her head. Sarah must have found out they'd have to sell everything to pay the debts. That child loved her grandmother more than anything. The thought of losing those connections, those memories. So she chose to stay blind rather than lose her grandmother's things, Keanu said, remembering how protectively Sarah had clutched her backpack. He stood up. Thank you, Dr. Chen. One more question. How much would the surgery cost? After leaving the hospital, Keanu drove to the address listed in Sarah's file. The apartment building was modest, but well-maintained, with a small garden out front. He found the superintendent easily, a heavy-set man watering plants. Rose Mitchell's apartment? The super said when Keanu asked. Yeah, I remember them. Sweet kid, that's Sarah. Rose was behind on rent when she passed, but she always made sure Sarah had what she needed. Is the apartment still empty? The super nodded. Can't rent it yet. All their stuff's still there until the estate gets settled. Social services was supposed to come pack it up, but then the girl disappeared. Could I see it? Keanu asked. I'm trying to help Sarah. The super studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Rose would have wanted someone looking out for her grandbaby. Come on. The apartment was small but tidy, frozen in time like its occupants had just stepped out. Dishes were still in the drying rack. An Afghan blanket was draped over a well-worn armchair. Photos covered the walls. Sarah as a baby, as a toddler, growing up year by year, always with her grandmother's arms around her. On a side table, Keanu found a stack of medical bills and payment receipts. Under them was a small notebook in Fiji, Rose's handwriting. The last entry made his heart ache. Almost there, sweet pea. Just 2 more months of payments, and you'll have your miracle. I promise you'll see the whole beautiful world soon. In the bedroom, he found Sarah's bed still made, stuffed animals arranged carefully on the pillow. A basket of clean laundry sat unfolded. On the dresser was a piggy bank with Sarah's Eye Surgery Fund written on it in careful child's handwriting. The super stood in the doorway. Rose came to me crying the day she got her diagnosis. Heart condition, real serious. She begged me not to tell Sarah. Didn't want to worry her when they were so close to affording the eye surgery. She never told Sarah she was sick? Nope. Said she'd tell her after the surgery. Wanted Sarah's first clear vision to be a happy memory, not seeing her grandmother hooked up to machines. The super wiped his eyes. Instead, the poor kid came home from school and found her... Well, Keanu picked up a framed photo from Sarah's nightstand. Sarah and Rose at what looked like a school concert, both beaming at the camera. Even with her vision problems, Sarah's eyes were bright with joy. She blames herself, Keanu realized. She thinks if she hadn't needed the surgery, Rose would have moved heaven and earth for that girl. The super shook his head. Never saw a grandmother love a child more. Back in his car, Keanu studied the photo he'd borrowed from the apartment. He had all the pieces now. Sarah's treatable blindness, Rose's secret illness, the desperate attempt to save money for surgery while hiding her own medical needs. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Found Sarah. She's at St. Mary's Shelter tonight. Thought you'd want to know. Keanu started his car, his mind made up. First, he'd need to talk to his accountant. Then, he'd need to find a way to convince a stubborn, brave, heartbroken little girl that accepting help wasn't betraying her grandmother's memory. But as he drove toward the shelter, his phone rang. It was Dr. Chen. I found something in Sarah's file you need to see, she said, her voice urgent. Something about her condition that changes everything. Keanu pulled his car over to the curb, his heart racing. What did you find? The surgery we were planning, Dr. Chen said, her voice tense with excitement. It's not just about giving Sarah her vision back. If we don't do it soon, she could lose her chance forever. What do you mean? There's a window of opportunity. With her condition, after a certain point, the damage becomes permanent. Papers rustled in the background. According to my calculations, we have less than 2 months before that window closes. Keanu gripped the steering wheel tighter. 2 months? That's all? If we don't do the surgery by then, she'll be blind permanently. Dr. Chen paused. And Keanu, there's something else. The longer we wait, the more dangerous her condition becomes. She's at risk for other complications. I'll find her, Keanu promised. Tonight. He drove to St. Mary's shelter, his mind racing. The evening shadows were growing long, and people were already lining up outside for dinner service. He spotted Sarah immediately, her small figure huddled on a bench near the entrance, white cane across her lap. As he approached, he noticed she was talking to an older man, with kind eyes, who sat next to her. "But did you eat anything else today, sunshine?" the man was asking. Sarah smiled. "Actually, Jimmy, I had the best pancakes this morning. Chocolate chip ones." "Someone bought you breakfast?" Jimmy looked concerned. "You know you have to be careful about." "It was safe," Sarah assured him. "He was nice. Like you." Keanu cleared his throat softly. "Hello, Sarah." She stiffened at the sound of his voice, but didn't run. Jimmy stood up, positioning himself protectively between them. "It's okay, Jimmy," Sarah said quietly. "This is the pancake person I told you about." Jimmy studied Keanu carefully, then nodded. "I'll be right inside if you need me, sunshine." After Jimmy left, Keanu sat down on the bench, leaving space between them. "I kept my word about being at Annie's this morning." "I know," Sarah whispered. I checked. The waitress said you were there. I'll be there tomorrow, too." He watched, her fingers worry at the hem of her jacket. "And the next day, and the day after that." "Why?" Her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. "Because I want to help you, Sarah. And because—" He took a deep breath. "Because I know about the surgery." Sarah jumped up, her cane clattering to the ground. "You had no right to." "Your grandmother worked so hard to save the money," Keanu continued gently, picking up her cane. "She wanted you to see the world so badly." "Stop it!" Sarah's voice shook. "Just stop." "She didn't tell you she was sick, did she? She didn't want you to worry when you were so close to getting your surgery." Sarah's legs seemed to give out, and she sank back onto the bench. "How do you know that?" "I visited your old apartment today. Talked to your super." Keanu held out the photo he'd borrowed. "I know you can't see it, but I brought something. It's a picture of you and your grandmother at your school concert last year." Sarah's hands trembled as she touched the frame. "The one where I played the piano?" "You're both smiling so big in this photo. Your grandmother looks so proud." A tear rolled down Sarah's cheek. She said she didn't feel well that night. But she came anyway. She never missed anything important." "Sarah," Keanu said softly, "your grandmother spent every penny she had trying to give you your vision. Do you really think she'd want you to give up that chance now?" "You don't understand." Sarah clutched the photo to her chest. "If I hadn't needed the surgery, she could have spent the money on doctors for herself. She might still be—" "No, sweet pea," Keanu said, using her grandmother's pet name. "Your grandmother was very sick. The super told me even the best doctors couldn't have saved her. But you? You can still have the gift she worked so hard to give you." Sarah was crying openly now. "But I promised her. The night before I found her. She made me promise never to be a burden to anyone. She said she was sorry she couldn't finish saving the money, but I shouldn't let anyone else have to take care of me. Oh, Sarah. Keanu gently touched her shoulder. She was trying to protect you. She knew she was dying, and she was scared about what would happen to you. But she didn't mean for you to suffer alone. How do you know? Because that's not what love looks like. Real love, the kind your grandmother had for you, wants the best for someone, no matter what. He squeezed her shoulder softly. Letting someone help you isn't being a burden. It's giving them a chance to show love, just like your grandmother did. Sarah's fingers traced the edge of the photo frame. I miss her so much. I know you do, and I know I can never replace her. But I can help make her biggest dream for you come true. Keanu took a deep breath. Dr. Chen told me something today. Something important about your surgery. He explained. About the time window, watching Sarah's face grow pale. 2 months? She whispered. That's all? That's all. After that, I'll be blind forever. Sarah's voice was very small. Grandma worked so hard, and I'll lose my chance completely. You don't have to. Keanu kept his voice gentle. I can help. The money's not a problem for me. But think of it as finishing what your grandmother started. Not charity, not a burden, just love being passed forward. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers still tracing the photo frame. Finally, she asked in a whisper, Would you come with me to see Dr. Chen? Of course I would. Keanu felt hope rise in his chest. We can go first thing tomorrow. After pancakes? The ghost of a smile touched Sarah's lips. After pancakes, he promised. Jimmy appeared in the shelter doorway. Sarah, dinner's ready, sunshine. Coming! She stood up, then hesitated. Keanu, could you describe the photo to me? One more time? You're sitting at the piano in your blue dress. Your grandmother is standing behind you, her hands on your shoulders. You're both laughing about something. Your whole faces are lit up with joy. There are flowers on the piano, and he stopped as Sarah held out the photo to him. Could you keep it safe? She asked. Until maybe I can see it for myself? Keanu carefully took the photo. I'll guard it with my life. As Sarah walked toward the shelter entrance, her cane tapping confidently, Keanu's phone buzzed. It was another text from Dr. Chen. There's one more thing about Sarah's condition you need to know before tomorrow. It's not as simple as we thought. Keanu called Dr. Chen immediately. What do you mean, it's not as simple? I've been reviewing Sarah's latest tests from before she disappeared, Dr. Chen explained. The pressure in her eyes has increased significantly. Without treatment, she could develop glaucoma on top of her existing condition. Keanu watched through the shelter window as Sarah ate dinner with Jimmy. How dangerous is that? It means we need to act fast. And Dr. Chen hesitated. It means the surgery is riskier now. We'll need to do additional procedures we hadn't planned on before. The next morning, Keanu arrived early at Annie's diner. To his relief, Sarah was already waiting outside, her white cane tapping nervously against the sidewalk. You came, he said softly. I promised. She managed a small smile. And you promised. Pancakes before the doctor. Over breakfast, Keanu gently explained what Dr. Chen had told him about the complications. Sarah grew very quiet, her fork pushing pieces of pancake around her plate. Are you scared? He asked. Sarah nodded. What if something goes wrong? Dr. Chen is the best eye surgeon in Los Angeles. But if you want to talk to other doctors, first, we can do that. No. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I trust Dr. Chen. Grandma said she was like an angel sent to help us. The hospital seemed bigger and more intimidating than it had yesterday. Sarah's grip on Keanu's arm tightened as they walked through the doors. The cheerful paintings on the EIBT walls and the sound of children playing in the waiting room did little to ease her tension. "Sarah!" Dr. Chen's warm voice called out as they entered her office. "Oh, sweetheart, I've been so worried about you." To Keanu's surprise, Sarah let go of his arm and moved straight toward Dr. Chen's voice, allowing the doctor to wrap her in a gentle hug. "I'm sorry I ran away," Sarah mumbled into Dr. Chen's coat. "What matters is that you're here now." Dr. Chen led her to an exam chair. "Let's take a look at those beautiful eyes of yours, okay?" As Dr. Chen began her examination, she kept up a steady stream of gentle conversation, telling Sarah about all the things she'd missed in the past 3 months. How the office had gotten new fish in the waiting room aquarium. How her assistant had adopted a puppy. How she'd kept Sarah's favorite stuffed animal safe in her office drawer. "You kept Mr. Whiskers?" Sarah asked, surprised. "Of course I did," Dr. Chen smiled. "You left him here the day of your last checkup. I knew you'd come back for him eventually." But as the exam continued, Dr. Chen's expression grew more serious. She caught Keanu's eye and gave a small shake of her head. "Sarah, honey," she said finally, "I need to talk to Keanu for a minute. Will you be okay with Jenny while we step out?" The nurse who had been assisting came forward with a familiar-looking stuffed cat. "Look who I found!" Sarah hugged Mr. Whiskers tightly as Keanu followed Dr. Chen into her office. "It's worse than I thought," Dr. Chen said as soon as the door closed. "The pressure in her eyes has reached dangerous levels. Without immediate treatment, she could lose her vision completely within weeks, not months." Keanu felt his stomach drop. "But you can still help her?" "Yes, but we need to do the surgery right away," and Dr. Chen hesitated. "The cost will be significantly higher now. We'll need specialized equipment, additional procedures." "Money isn't an issue," Keanu said firmly. "Whatever she needs." "There's something else." Dr. Chen picked up Sarah's file. "The recovery will be much harder now. She'll need constant care for at least 6 weeks. Special medications, regular checkups, a completely controlled environment." "She can stay with me," Keanu said without hesitation. "I have plenty of room, and I can hire nurses. It's not that simple." Dr. Chen's voice was gentle. "You're not her legal guardian. Without proper authorization, we can't perform the surgery at all." Keanu ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "There has to be a way." "There might be." Dr. Chen pulled out some papers. "We can apply for emergency temporary guardianship. Given her situation and the medical urgency, a judge might fast-track it." But what?" "But Sarah would have to agree. And after everything she's been through, after running away to avoid the system..." Dr. Chen shook her head. "It might be too much to ask." They returned to the exam room to find Sarah still, clutching Mr. Whiskers, her face pale but determined. "I heard everything," she said before they could speak. "These walls are pretty thin." "Sarah," Keanu started. "Is it true?" she interrupted. "Just weeks? And then even surgery won't help?" "Yes," Dr. Chen said softly. "I'm so sorry. Sweetheart." Sarah's fingers tightened on the stuffed cat. "And you'd really let me stay with you?" she asked Keanu. "You'd do all that for me?" "In a heartbeat," he answered. "But why?" Her voice cracked. "You don't even know me." Because everyone deserves a chance at their miracle, Keanu said. Your grandmother knew that. That's why she worked so hard to save you. Now it's my turn to help finish what she started. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath. Okay. Okay? Dr. Chen asked carefully. Okay to everything. The guardianship, the surgery, all of it. Sarah's voice strengthened. But I have 2 conditions. Name them, Keanu said. First, when I can see. She hugged Mr. Whiskers tighter. Will you take me to visit Grandma? At the cemetery? Of course. And second, Sarah turned toward Dr. Chen's voice. Can we do it right now? Before I get scared again? Dr. Chen and Keanu exchanged looks. Sarah, Dr. Chen said gently, we need to get the guardianship approved first. And there are tests we need to… Please? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I don't want to wait. I don't want to lose my chance like Grandma lost hers. Before either adult could respond, a sharp pain shot through Sarah's head. She cried out, dropping Mr. Whiskers and pressing her hands to her eyes. Sarah! Keanu rushed forward as she swayed in the chair. Something's wrong, she gasped. Everything hurts. Dr. Chen was already reaching for her phone. Get me Dr. Torres in emergency, now! Everything happened so fast after that. Sarah felt herself being lifted onto a stretcher, heard urgent voices talking about pressure and medications. Someone was holding her hand. Keanu, she thought, while they rushed through hospital corridors. Stay with me, Sarah. Keanu's voice kept saying, You're going to be okay. The pain in her head was getting worse. She could hear Dr. Chen talking rapidly to someone named Dr. Torres, using big medical words she didn't understand. But one phrase cut through the fog of pain. If we don't operate immediately, she'll lose her vision permanently. But the guardianship, Keanu started. No time, Dr. Torres interrupted. This is now a medical emergency. We can operate to save her vision under emergency provisions. Sarah squeezed Keanu's hand. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, sweet pea. His voice was gentle, but shaking slightly. But you're so brave, just like your grandmother always said. And I'll be right here when you wake up. Promise? I promise. He squeezed her hand back. And I brought something for luck. She felt something soft and familiar being tucked against. Her side, Mr. Whiskers. Don't leave him again, Keanu said softly. Some friends are too important to lose. As the nurses prepared her for surgery, Sarah's mind drifted to her last conversation with her grandmother. It was the morning before everything changed. She hadn't thought about that morning in months. It hurt too much. But now, the memory came flooding back. Sarah, sweet pea, Grandma Rose had said, sitting on the edge of her bed. I need you to promise me something. Anything, Grandma. Promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel like a burden. Promise me you'll remember how special you are, how much you deserve good things. Sarah had been confused. Why are you saying this? Because sometimes, her grandmother's voice had caught. Sometimes life doesn't work out the way we plan. Sometimes we have to trust others to help us achieve our dreams. Is this about the surgery money? Because I don't need. This is about your future, sweet pea. About all the beautiful things you're meant to see. Her grandmother had hugged her tightly. Promise me you'll keep fighting for your miracle, no matter what. I promise, Grandma. Now, lying on the operating table as the anesthesia began to take effect, Sarah finally understood. She'd gotten her grandmother's last message all wrong. She hadn't wanted Sarah to refuse help. She'd wanted her to be brave enough to accept it. I'm sorry, Grandma, she whispered as the world began to fade. I understand now. When Sarah woke up, the first thing she noticed was that the pain was gone. The second thing was that her eyes were covered with thick bandages. And the third thing was that someone was holding her hand. Keanu? Her voice was scratchy. Right here, just like I promised. His hand squeezed hers gently. How are you feeling? Tired. Is Dr. Chen here? I'm here, sweetheart. Dr. Chen's voice came from her other side. The surgery went very well. Dr. Torres and I were able to repair everything. When can I... Sarah's voice trembled. When can I try to see? We'll need to keep the bandages on for a week while you heal, Dr. Chen explained. But Sarah... The surgery was successful. Once you're healed, you should have full vision. Sarah felt tears soak into her bandages. Really? Really, Dr. Chen confirmed. Your grandmother would be so proud of you. She'd be proud of how brave you were, Keanu added, just like she always said. Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking, I heard her, you know, during the surgery. You heard her? Keanu asked gently. I remembered something she told me the day before she died. I thought she was making me promise not to ask for help, but I was wrong. Sarah's voice grew stronger. She was trying to tell me it was okay to let people help. She wanted me to keep fighting for my miracle. That sounds exactly like your grandmother, Dr. Chen said softly. She never gave up hope for you. And now, Keanu added, thanks to her love and your courage, you're going to see all those beautiful things she wanted for you. Sarah reached up to touch her bandages. A whole week? A week isn't so long, Keanu said. And I have some good news that might help pass the time. What news? The judge approved emergency temporary guardianship an hour ago. You can come stay at my house while you recover, just like we planned. Sarah felt fresh tears dampen her bandages. You still want me to? Even with all this drama? Even more now. Keanu's voice was firm. You're family now, Sarah, and family sticks together. Family, Sarah repeated softly. Then she remembered something. Keanu, do you still have that photo? The one from my concert? Right here in my pocket, safe and sound. Will you be there? When they take the bandages off? So you can show it to me? Wouldn't miss it for the world. His hand squeezed hers again. It'll be the first thing you see. Sarah smiled, feeling peace wash over her for the first time in months. But before she could respond, a commotion in the hallway caught their attention. Dr. Chen! A nurse burst into the room. They found something in the old medical records. Something about Sarah's mother? Dr. Chen hurried to the door, speaking in hushed tones with the nurse. Sarah felt Keanu's hand tighten on hers. What is it? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. What did they find? Dr. Chen came back to Sarah's bedside. Sarah, sweetie, according to these records, your mother had the exact same eye condition you have. My mother? Sarah hadn't thought about her mother in years. Grandma Rose rarely spoke of her daughter who had died when Sarah was a baby. But what does that mean? It means, Dr. Chen said gently, that what happened to you isn't random. It's genetic, passed down in families. Your mother was planning to have the same surgery, but she never got the chance. Why not? There was a pause before Dr. Chen answered. She was waiting until after you were born. The pregnancy made the surgery too risky. But then there were complications during childbirth, and Sarah felt tears soaking into her bandages again. She died because she was waiting? Because of me? No, sweet pea, Keanu said firmly. She died because sometimes life isn't fair. But she gave you the greatest gift she could. She gave you life, and a chance at the surgery she never got to have. Your grandmother knew about this, Dr. Chen added softly. That's why she was so determined to get you the surgery. She didn't want you to lose your chance like your mother did. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. So my mother, she chose me over her vision? That's what mothers do, Dr. Chen said. They put their children first, just like your grandmother put you first by saving for your surgery instead of spending money on her own medical care. And now, Keanu added, you've honored both their sacrifices by being brave enough to accept help and fight for your future. 18. Week later, Sarah sat nervously in Dr. Chen's office, waiting for her bandages to be removed. Keanu stood beside her, the concert photo ready in his hand. Okay, Sarah, Dr. Chen said. I'm going to take the bandages off now. Keep your eyes closed until I tell you to open them. Sarah felt the bandages being unwrapped, layer by layer. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst. Almost done, Dr. Chen said. Now, when you open your eyes, things will be blurry at first. That's normal. Your brain needs time to adjust. I'm scared, Sarah whispered. We're right here, Keanu assured her. Take all the time you need. The last bandage came off. Sarah kept her eyes tightly shut. Whenever you're ready, Dr. Chen said gently. Just open them slowly. Sarah took a deep breath, thinking of her mother, who had given up everything for her, of her grandmother who had worked so hard to give her this chance, of Keanu, who had helped make their dream come true. Slowly, she opened her eyes. At first, everything was a blur of colors and shapes, but gradually, like a camera lens focusing, things began to become clear. She saw the white walls of the office, the colorful children's paintings hanging on them. She saw Dr. Chen's kind smile, saw the happy tears in her eyes, and then she turned to see Keanu for the first time. "Oh," she gasped, You look so kind. Just like you sound." Keanu laughed, wiping tears from his own eyes. "Welcome to the world of sight, sweet pea." He held out the concert photo. Sarah's hands trembled as she took it, finally able to see her grandmother's face. "She's so beautiful," Sarah whispered, tracing her grandmother's smile with her finger. "And look how happy we are." "You know what today is?" Keanu asked softly. Sarah nodded. "1 month since you first heard me outside the coffee shop. Since you changed everything." "Actually," Keanu smiled, "it's your mother's birthday. Dr. Chen found it in the records. I think maybe she helped send me to you that day." Sarah looked at the photo again, seeing herself at the piano, her grandmother beaming behind her. She thought of her mother, who had given her life at the cost of her own, of her grandmother, who had sacrificed everything to give her a chance at sight, of Keanu, who had helped make their dreams come true. "What do you want to see first?" Keanu asked. "After you're cleared to go outside, I mean." "Everything," Sarah said. "The ocean, like I promised Grandma. A sunset. The flowers in the hospital garden." She paused. "But first I want to go thank Jimmy at the shelter. And maybe help other kids there, like you helped me." Keanu smiled. "I think that's a perfect place to start." 2 months later, Sarah stood at her grandmother's grave, seeing it clearly for the first time. She placed fresh flowers next to the headstone, then stepped back to stand between Keanu and Dr. Chen. "I did it, Grandma," she said softly. "I got my miracle. And you were right. I wasn't a burden." I was worth fighting for, worth helping, just like you always said. She looked up at Keanu, who had officially become her legal guardian. Can we go to the shelter now? The art supplies we bought should be delivered today. Keanu nodded. After Sarah's story had been in the news, donations had poured in to help other children at the shelter. Sarah had insisted that the first thing they buy should be art supplies, so kids can create beautiful things while they wait for their own miracles. As they walked to the car, Sarah stopped to watch a butterfly land on a nearby flower. She still marveled at being able to see such small, beautiful things. "You know what?" she said. "I think Mom and Grandma Rose did get to see me have the surgery after all. They just watched from somewhere else." "I think you're right," Keanu agreed, "and I bet they're so proud of who you've become." Sarah smiled, taking one last look at the butterfly before it flew away. She had learned that some of the most precious gifts come wrapped in the hardest packages. Her mother had given her life. Her grandmother had given her hope. Keanu had given her a future. And now it was her turn to give back. "Ready to go help some kids?" she asked. "Lead the way," Keanu said. "After all, you're the expert on miracles now." Sarah laughed, taking his hand as they walked into their new beginning, one that was clearer and brighter than any of them could have imagined that first morning outside the coffee shop. Thanks for coming along on Sarah and Keanu's journey. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and if this heartwarming story touched you. If you enjoyed this tale of hope and second chances, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Your support helps us share more moments of kindness that change lives.